Jonathan, I've heard you say that the destruction of attention is the largest threat to humanity that's happening around the world. And I've also heard you say that short-form videos are the worst of the worst because they're shattering attention spans. The reason why I wanted to have this conversation today is somewhat personal. And in fact, all of the conversations I have in the diary obviously are somewhat personal to some degree. They're inspired by some unanswered question I have in my head and also some observation I have in my life. And the observation I've had is that short-form videos in particular are making my life worse. And actually, I've got to say, the catalyst moment really where I thought, I need to get you exceptional people together to have this conversation was I thought this, I then looked at my screen time and saw a huge change. I felt so much worse because all these social platforms have short-form video now. And then I actually heard Elon Musk, who, has a social media platform that does short-form video, say that he thinks it's one of the worst inventions for humanity. Mm-hmm. Jonathan, why did you say what you said about short-form video and this corruption of attention?
Yeah, because I wrote a whole book called The Anxious Generation, focusing on teen mental health. That was the mystery that popped up in the mid-2000s. Why are people born after 1995 so much more anxious and depressed? And I've been tracking down that mystery, and a lot of it points to social media, and especially Instagram, social comparison, all the things we know about social media. When the book came out in 2024, since then, what I realized is that I vastly underestimated the damage because I focused on mental health, which is a catastrophe. But the bigger damage is the destruction of the human ability to pay attention. Without the ability to pay attention for several minutes at a time, ideally 10 or 20 minutes at a time, without that, you're not going to be of much use as an employee. You're not going to be of much use as a spouse. You're not going to be successful in life. And that's when I realized this is way beyond mental health. This is changing human cognition, changing human attention, and possibly on a global scale.
Aditi, what perspective do you come at this from, and what's been your perspective through all the work you've done about brains and stress and neuroscience and all these kinds of things that has shaped the way that you think about social media, screen time, short-form video?
My background is that I'm a physician at Harvard, and my expertise is in stress, burnout, and mental health. And so that is the lens that I view all of this through. We know that the most deleterious relationship that you have is with your device. In every healthy relationship, we have boundaries. We have boundaries with our kids, our parents, our colleagues, with our friends, and yet we have no boundaries and often porous boundaries when it comes to the relationship you have with your device. So it's not so much about, becoming a digital monk and renouncing technology, because technology can serve us, right? It inspires, educates, connects. Now more than ever, it's so important to be an informed citizen, but not at the expense of your mental health. And so what Jonathan was saying, this, constant being engaged with your devices, with social media, the scrolling from the minute you wake up until you go to bed, there's a reason why you have your best ideas in the shower. And that's because that's the only place in the whole day where you are not with your device. People take their device to the bathroom, they sleep with your device, you eat with your device, people walk down the street. There's more near-miss pedestrian accidents because people are walking while they're crossing the street and looking at their devices. And so there's all of this brain biology at play behind the scenes. So both of you have talked about how it doesn't feel good to engage and constantly be on your phone, that sense of infinite scroll. But there is, it feels like you're doing nothing. You're just doing this, right? What are you doing? But in fact, it is not passive. It is active, and it has a profound effect on your biology, on your brain, on your psychology, and also social factors that I hope we talk about today.
Scrolling, wasting a bit of time doesn't seem so harmful. What is the big, if we play this forward 10, 20, 30 years, what is the big risk or threat?
The biggest threat right now, we don't even have to wait 20 years, is that through a process called neuroplasticity, which is just a big fancy word that simply means that your brain is a muscle, is that by engaging with social media, that sense of high volume, low quality, quick videos, you are actively rewiring your brain for the worst. So you're increasing your sense of stress, worsening your mental health, attention, cognition, distractibility, irritability, complex problem solving. All of that changes when you engage in that infinite scroll.
Yeah, I'd like to add on here, because one of the main arguments I get is, this is what they said about television. This is what they said about comic books. This is just another moral panic. But people need to understand why touchscreen devices are so different from television. And so parents find this helpful if I just lay this out briefly, good screen time versus bad screen time. So humans are storytelling animals. We have always, as long as we've had language, we've raised our kids with stories, epic poems, all kinds of stories. Stories are good. The human brain needs lots of patterns. The child's brain needs lots of patterns to develop. So the worst thing you can do is hand your child a device because they're crying for it because they're trained to get it, and you're busy, so you hand them the device, they're quiet. What's happening? They're sitting alone. Not, when I was a kid, we always watched with my sisters, with my friends, you're arguing about it, you're talking at social. Kid's sitting alone with a device in his hand. It's not long stories. It's never long stories. It always ends up at YouTube Shorts or TikTok or Instagram Reels for older kids. So they're doing this, but here's the key thing that it does that a television does not. A television puts you in a state that psychologists call transportation. You get into a story and you find yourself pulled in and you're rooting for the characters. And this is how a brain gets tuned up to social patterns. But it can't happen in 10 seconds. It can't happen in 1 minute. It takes a long period of time. And there is no reinforcement. The television doesn't do anything to you. You don't have any response. Whereas a touchscreen device is a Skinner box. So B.F. Skinner was one of the founders of behaviorism, and he put rats and pigeons in a box where he could deliver a reinforcement, a little grain of food, on a schedule. And by giving them quick reinforcements for behavior, he could train them to do amazing tricks in just a few hours. When you give your kid a touchscreen device, it's stimulus, response, swipe, get a reward or not, variable ratio, and then and you just keep doing that. So you are, as Aditi said, it is rewiring your brain. It's not just wasting time. It is literally training you to do things where television didn't do that. So this is a whole new game.
And to add to that, from the medical perspective, you're shortening this attention span. And what happens over time is, so like Jonathan said, right, you're not sleeping as well because you are engaged with your device. We know that 80% of people are checking their phones within minutes of waking up. We have something called revenge bedtime procrastination, this concept of, at the end of the day, you're fatigued, you've had a long day, you've had no me time, and you want to get to bed early. We all know, by the way, what the data is, that we've been taught since we were little kids, right? Like bedtime, sleep is important. It's good for your body. It's good for your brain. And we might have all the knowledge in the world, but in terms of action, there's a wide gap between knowledge and information and action. And so revenge bedtime procrastination is kind of an offshoot. So what happens? So, you have that decreased attention, you have that irritability, hypervigilance. And so at night, at the end of the day, it's 9 p.m. You finally, if you're a parent, your kids are asleep, your kitchen is clean, maybe you finish your entrepreneurial day and you finally sit down with Melanie on the couch and you're like, some me time. And you want to get to bed early and it's good for you. But then suddenly you're scrolling and before you know it, it's 2 a.m. And you're saying, oh my God, what happened? Why am I still awake? What was I doing all this time? What happens is that you essentially give yourself some me time at night. And so you procrastinate bedtime. And so what happens is with this revenge bedtime procrastination, it affects your sleep. And then when you don't have good sleep, good quality sleep, so you have difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, sleep debt over time for kids, for adults, has all sorts of ramifications. So this is just the tip of the iceberg, this short form video content, and the ripple effects go far and wide. Not only is it rewiring your brain, it's rewiring your body. It is affecting your sleep, which increases your risk of heart disease later in life. And when you're consuming graphic videos and graphic images, it can increase your personal risk of PTSD through vicarious trauma, even if you weren't there. So this is just a vast network of things that can happen to you simply because you're thinking, it's harmless. What is it? It's just a bunch of videos that I'm checking out as a way for me to decompress.
What do I need to know about the nature of the brain to understand exactly what short form video is playing, is hijacking, is taking advantage of?
The thing to understand about all of this is that we have to focus on childhood. Why do we have childhood? Humans have this really interesting childhood where we grow rapidly at first and then we slow down for about 5 or 7 years. We don't grow very quickly. And then we speed up at puberty. Whereas other primates, they just grow and grow till they reach reproductive age, and then they reproduce. But we seem to have this long period of sort of middle childhood for cultural learning. It's a period in which the kid is now walking and talking and turning away from the parents and And that's a time for this to come in, and they pay attention and they form relations. All these things have to happen slowly because the neurons are gradually growing. They're finding each other based on what the child is doing. Okay, so we grow up in the real world, and that happens over time. And a lot of that is very physical. Kids are very physical. Mammals are very physical, and there's a lot of touch. So that's a healthy human childhood. But when you give an iPad or your old iPhone, and they begin doing the touching and swiping, that is going to hijack their attention. That is going to push out all other forms of action and learning. And that is going to change the way the parts of the brain that learn to pay attention, what's called executive function. It's going to change the way the brain learns to pay attention. It's going to change the reward circuits. I think you had Anna Lemke on recently, who's the nation's expert on addiction. And the way that she describes it, how any one addiction is going to change your reward pathways to make you more vulnerable to other addictions. So we're setting our kids up, not just for this, but then when they get a little older, it'll be video games, it'll be porn, it'll be gambling. Now everything is gambling. So we're setting them up for a life in which their brain is saying, give me some quick dopamine. Give me some quick dopamine. I don't want to have to work for anything. I don't want to have to apply myself for an hour and then get a reward. And so what the short videos are doing for kids is preventing them from learning the connection between hard work and a reward.